In February 2023, the current Senate Ethics Officer published a document entitled Guideline on Outside Activities on his website and emailed senators an accompanying explanatory memo. In his email, Mr. Legault stated that his guideline should, quote, only be used as a tool of reference in order to better understand the code, close quote, but then it stated, quote, and how I interpret and apply it as of the date of its publication, unquote. So, Justice O'Reilly, this guideline does not set forth an inconsequential interpretation of the Ethics Code. It creates substantial new requirements and restrictions in the Ethics Code. The current Senate Ethics Officer recently deleted the section of his guideline dealing with parliamentary friendship groups, but the remainder of this guideline remains intact. Given that there are many other new and potentially problematic requirements and restrictions included in that guideline, these must be sanctioned by the Senate as a whole, not be imposed by the Senate Ethics Officer. Will you agree to review this guideline document and remove any provisions which are outside its proper scope?
Mr. O'Reilly.
Merci. Well, senators, that's a very specific question that I'm not really in a position to answer, having not studied those guidelines closely. But I would have thought that the guidelines are meant to give further guidance on the interpretation of the provisions of the code without going beyond the parameters of what's in the code at present, much as the way delegated legislation might work. Or to give the example in the judicial context, the commentaries on judicial conduct do not go beyond the overarching principles to which judges are bound. But that's only a superficial response, I'm afraid, in the circumstances, but I can certainly undertake to look at that question.
Senator Batters?
Thank you, Justice O'Reilly. I appreciate that. And one of those potentially problematic areas contained in that February 2023 guideline are the restrictions noted in that document regarding senators' social media accounts. And the Senate Ethics Code, the rules of the Senate, Senate administrative rules, and even the Senator's Office management policy are all silent on the matter of senators' social media accounts. And as such, I would submit that those restrictions outlined in that guideline are entirely novel. And as such, as you were indicating to my colleague, this should be a matter for senators to decide, and any such restrictions would need to be sanctioned by the Senate as a whole. Maybe that would be part of the new reflection on the code as a whole. But again, would you just agree to review those guideline provisions, please, given that it could take some time for the Senate Ethics Committee to provide us with potential draft provisions for the new code, and keep that in mind?
Mr. O'Reilly.
I think my to-do list is getting longer. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Batters?
Thank you. Lastly, Justice O'Reilly, I'd like to ask you about this, since we are parliamentarians, not judges, and the Senate Ethics Code defines parliamentary duties and functions as, quote, including public and official business and partisan matters, unquote. So how do you see the role of senators as parliamentarians intersecting with that of partisanship? And could you please explain whether you see senators' expression of political or partisan views as contrary to the Senate Ethics Code?
Mr. O'Reilly.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the gist of your question. Do you mind repeating it?
Sure.
Senator Batters.
What I'm specifically looking at is the role of senators as parliamentarians. How do you see partisanship, which is specifically authorized under the Senate Ethics Code as defining parliamentary duties and functions as, quote, including public and official business and partisan matters? So as a result, do you see senators' expression of political and partisan views as complementary to the Senate Ethics Code, or would you say that it would be contrary to it?
Mr. O'Reilly.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, partisanship, of course, is not a violation of any kind of ethical standard for a body of this nature. It would be in the judicial context. But obviously, the code is developed and applied and interpreted with the understanding that there is some element of partisanship that's inherent in what this body is intended to do. Of course, at the same time, it sets limits on conduct and perhaps on expression as well in order to support and sustain those aspirational principles of dignity and so on. So I don't see a conflict between those things, but certainly they would apply differently in this context than they would in others, and I understand that.